And away we go. So yeah, first and foremost, thanks for being on the call. Sounds like some of you guys had trouble getting on the other day, so apologize for that. But glad you're here. Looking forward to talking lighting with you and boosting some lighting skills and knowledge and everything that you guys need to sell light fixtures in the stores. So this presentation was put on by Hudson Valley Lighting. This is Kelly here. She's our VP of Sales for Hudson Valley Lighting Group. That group comprises 4 different brands: Mitzi, Hudson Valley, Corbett, and Troy Lighting. Each has its own unique design flair, price point, finish styles, all that. At the end of this call, I'll give you guys some resources so you can actually use that website. It's a really, really great website to browse with your customers and specify lighting. So this course was really meant to give you guys a basics in lighting. You know, for those of you who are new to selling lighting, we're going to talk about lighting terminology, some of the different categories, recommendations as far as sizing, light bulbs, things like that. And so we're first going to start by just talking about different layering, different lighting layers. So the first being just general or ambient lighting. So this is probably like the most common that you're gonna think about when you're talking about lighting, and really the reason we're talking about different lighting layers is to get your customers thinking about it. So one of the best the best ways to sell, I think, is by asking questions. And so if you can ask your customer, hey, what are the lighting layers in your house, or what's your existing lighting setup like? You know, if you're working on a kitchen remodel or a bath remodel, get them to think about lighting. You know, what do they have planned for it? What are the different layers that they're using? Because those different layers are going to create a really dynamic experience in the finished product. So the first layer here is going to be ambient lighting. And generally I always think about this in terms of recessed lighting, because it's going to light the room in a very general way. It's the base layer. It's the base layer in a thoughtful lighting layout. So we'll talk about some of the task layers afterwards, but you can think about this in terms of, general layers such as chandeliers or recessed lighting. Here we have a fixture from Hudson Valley, which, hey, if that fixture was in the center of a kitchen or dining room, and that was the only light source, that would be your ambient layer, providing light through the whole room. And here's a couple more chandeliers from Hudson Valley. So as you can see in this, the picture on the left here, so that chandelier is providing light to that whole nook area there. I don't see any other recessed fixtures there aside from natural daylight. So if we're in the dark there, or if it's at night, that's going to be your general layer, or your ambient layer, I should say. Here's another couple examples of ambient lighting. So as you can see on the top left there, we have some recess fixtures. Those are the little openings in the ceiling there. We're actually going to talk about this little cove lighting feature as well. That's a different layer of lighting. But you can see on the left here, it's a pretty dynamic environment. You've got the ambient lighting in the ceiling. You've got some cove lighting. I don't see any task lighting or any kind of accent, but much more dynamic than what you would see on the bottom right here. So here we're just looking at some Satco blink fixtures. This is a brand called Satco, and these are flush mounts here, just lighting a hallway. So second layer we'll talk about is task lighting. Pretty self-explanatory. If you're doing a task, you want to have some lighting around that. So in this particular situation, and perfect for you guys, every bathroom needs some type of task lighting. Usually that's over a mirror, whether it's a single fixture over a mirror or you have 2 sconces on either side. That task layer provides light for doing tasks like putting on makeup, cutting your nails, brushing your hair, whatever it may be. So for you guys, really every kitchen and bath remodel should have some type of task lighting on there. And so again, when you're talking about the sales process, get them to, ask that question, get them to start thinking about their lighting, and explain the importance of it. Explain the importance of the different layers of lighting, and how that really affects the space and the final product. So this is a on the right side here, we have a beautiful Mitzi sconce, and that's actually, it's hard to see there, but that's actually Calcutta marble with these bare bulbs there. Really cool little fixture. Here again, so obviously now we're in the kitchen, but again, task lighting here. So you have these directional pendants. So not all pendants are quite as directional as this. You know, this is a really good example where you have a metal shade and you have light projecting downwards. So for your task on the table, whether you're chopping up some onions or whether you're eating dinner, you have that task layer on the kitchen island there. And then again, from the previous slide, we've got some general lighting with our ceiling cans there. And again, here, a couple more task fixtures. So you've got a little nook, little business area here with your wall sconce. And again, a little reading area by your window there with a nice little bed light or a reading light on the side, both of those from Hudson Valley Lighting. And how about these spaces? Love looking at their setting shots, just great. Great pieces to show your customers too, to get the ideas flowing. They have some great application shots, so I encourage you to use the website. I can talk with Ken after too if you want me to send you pretty much all of our application shots. They work with designers and they have them send those application shots, and so it's just a really good jumping off point for you guys when you're working with your customers to show your customers, hey, this is what we can do. This is kind of what lighting can do to enhance that space.
Yeah, I love that. I love to use some of this stuff on social media.
Absolutely. And these are, this is actually from George Kovacs lighting here. So you've got, again, another example of task lighting could just be like a desk lamp, right? I mean, if you're doing a little work at your office there, this is a little reading lamp from George Kovacs. And then probably one of the most common too is, like we said, like the bedside swing arm lamps or the bedside reading lamps there. And then the last layer is accent lighting. This is kind of what ties it all together. So I think about this in terms of, hey, what do you want to accent in your space? Do you have a piece of artwork that you want to accent? Do you have some architecture that really could use that? Something you want to call attention to, right? So if you have a really unique, wall finish or something like that, this accent lighting layer is really going to highlight that and make that space pop. Generally, that should be about 3 times brighter than the surrounding areas. So if you're accenting a piece of artwork, obviously that that piece of artwork should be highlighted. And so generally, it should be about 3 times as bright as the surrounding area to make it pop. And again, so we went back. I showed you guys this picture here from the first one of the first slides. But this is a great example of, number one, general or ambient lighting here with the recessed fixtures. That's going to provide general light. But then you have this really beautiful cove lighting. So this architecture here is really unique. Without that lighting there, much less dynamic, doesn't call attention to it as much. But when you add that little accent layer there, it just makes it a much more fun space, a much more interesting space. And then same here too for, this is a Mitzi picture light here. Again, it's an accent piece, right? So we have this really unique piece of artwork at the end of a hallway. And to highlight that, we're putting a little, piece of, a little more extra light on there. So we have our general lighting or ambient lighting in the ceiling, but then we're also calling attention to that color and that splash of the color at the end of the hallway. And here's a really good example of tying everything together. So tying all those 3 examples together, we have our general or ambient lighting in the ceiling there with our recessed fixtures. We have some task lighting with the floor lamp over here. And then we've also got some accent lighting, so highlighting this piece of artwork on the wall with the ceiling fixture. So this is actually, it's a ceiling fixture, but it's projecting onto the artwork, and it's called a wall wash. And so this is just a really good example of all 3 of those coming together to create a really interesting and fun environment. So next up, let's talk sizing. Again, probably, when you're talking with customers, very, very important to size things appropriately, and probably one of the most difficult things to do as a lighting designer and as a sales associate, because there's so many different fixture styles out there. That you really gotta, kind of use what's given to you and use the spacing and the fixtures to size it appropriately. So let's just talk chandeliers to start. So this is a beautiful chandelier from Hudson Valley called Bari, one of my favorite pieces here in aged brass. One second here. Oops. So a really helpful piece of advice that I found is, in general, chandeliers should be no larger than 3/4 of the table's width. So if we're talking about a circular table, a breakfast nook area, if that table is about 40 inches, typically you don't want to go any wider in diameter than, let's say, 25 to 28 inches, even 30 inches in width. Anything larger than that, it's going to kind of overpower the space. It's going to feel a little bit bulky in that area. If we're doing a linear piece, generally you don't want those to extend closer than 6 inches to the table's edge. So in this space right here, we don't have really a dining table under here or an island that we have to worry about, but we still want to make sure that chandelier is appropriately sized in that environment. So a good kind of general rule of thumb is you want to add the dimensions of the room, convert that to inches, and that should be roughly your diameter for the chandelier. So in this space here, let's just call it a 15-foot by 10-foot room. That's 115 plus 10 is 25. So that's about a 25-inch chandelier. Looks great in that environment. It's a nice airy chandelier, so it doesn't feel overpowering and large. And I think that's appropriately sized for this room here. So another really helpful, another really helpful piece of advice too is you're always trying to figure out, hey, even in my own house when I put up a chandelier, what's the appropriate distance off the table? It's going to depend somewhat on the height of your ceiling. So number one, you have to talk with your customer. What is the height of your ceiling? Most of the time, it's going to be 8 feet, not always, but that's certainly going to limit what you can do in that space. So in general, you want to have the bottom of that fixture hang about 30 inches above the table. So in this space here, obviously we don't have a dining room table that we're worrying about, but I think it looks appropriate in that environment. We certainly wouldn't want to bring that super low because that would interfere with our living space. But if you're in a dining room or if you're over a kitchen island, about 30 inches off the table, and again, about 6 inches narrower than the width of the table. If this was a linear, if we were doing a linear piece here, again, the width of it shouldn't be larger than 3/4 of the table, and then the depth, or I guess you could call it the width as well, you don't want that any further than 6 inches closer to the width of the table. And that's a general rule of thumb. I disregarded all of these when putting a chandelier in my house because the chandelier I chose was very airy, and it didn't feel big in that space. So my chandelier actually goes right to the edge of the table, and it works because of the style of that. So I don't think these are black and white rules, but just a general guideline. So wall sconces here, keep sconces within the same finish family. So certainly if you're doing multiple sconces, even if they're different design styles, keep them in the same finish family in the same room. They should sit approximately 60 inches from the floor. Certainly that's going to depend if you have an existing junction box there already. If you do, then obviously you're limited by space there. And then space them approximately every 6 to 8 feet. And pendants, probably the biggest category that we have. Pendants are the most versatile, I think, of all lighting categories. You can use them in entryways, in bathrooms, kitchens. just a really, really versatile type of lighting. In general, you don't want to hang them lower than 7 feet from the floor. That says 7 inches. Don't put them 7 inches off the floor. That's a bad idea. 7 feet from the floor. And leave approximately 32 inches from the countertop to the fixture base. So again, just like we talked about previously, about 32 to 32 inches off the base of the island or kitchen table. So in this particular instance here, a really big trend in kitchen remodel is instead of doing 3 mini pendants over an island, a lot of people want to do just 2 over an island. And how do you size those appropriately? So my recommendation would be to just kind of follow the guidelines that we use for chandeliers. So if you were to add up the 2 widths of these pendants here, let's say they're 18 inches. 18 plus 18 is 36, I believe. So as long as that's not larger than 3/4 of this island, I think you're okay. So in this case here, the island looks to me probably about 55, 60 inches, I would say, maybe 60 inches. So in this case, 36 inches, that's a good fixture size. And since we're spacing them apart like that, I think that's appropriate. So this little portion here, so another big trend in lighting right now is we're seeing a lot more people do pendants on the side of a bedroom. I'm sorry, on the side of a bed. So instead of doing little task lights, we're seeing a little bit more, of a decorative trend where people are using pendants on the side of the bed. And generally, you want to space those about 42 inches from the floor. So again, gonna kind of depend on your placement in the ceiling and the table that you have underneath, but that's a general guideline. So flush mounts here. Love this piece by Hudson Valley. Beautiful aged brass piece there. Works really well in this room here. So in general, don't hang them lower than 7 feet from the floor. And again, that's a pretty much across the board because obviously door frames are going to go to 7 feet, so we want to keep them above that. If you're doing them in a hallway, you want to place them approximately 10 feet apart. If you have a long hallway, that's really important because you don't want to overload it, but you want to make sure it's adequately lit. And here's a couple from Minka that I really like too. So again, you've got a 7-foot door frame there. This hangs about 12 inches off the ceiling. And so we are looking good there. I'm going to skip over this part actually. We're going to go right here. So really important for you guys, obviously if you're doing a bath light over a mirror, really important to size that appropriately. You have different size bathrooms in the house, whether it's a master or a spare bedroom or a spare bathroom. So generally the fixture width should not be more than 75% of the mirror width. The most popular mirror size is probably about 30 inches, at least from what I can tell. So generally, our most popular bath sizes, it's usually a 3-light bath bar. That's about 24 inches. But certainly going to depend on the size of the mirror. In this case, we've got probably like a 24-inch mirror, I would say. And so we're going with a 2-light here, which looks great. Well sized. And then if you have a really long mirror, consider going multiple fixtures over it. There are some really wide fixtures that you can use, but again, that's going to depend on the junction box placement. But generally, if you have a really, really wide mirror, you want to do 2 lights over those. So let's talk about light bulbs, everybody's favorite thing, I'm sure. So just a real quick run through of color temperature. So color temperature is extremely important. When we are lamping things, and when I say lamping, I mean putting light bulbs and recommending light bulbs and things, it's really important to gauge the customer's the customer's preference and also your knowledge of it. So when we talk of color temperature, we're talking about the appearance of that light, whether it be very cool or white, or whether it's warmer and yellow or orangey. So it's kind of counterintuitive here. So as we move from left to right, the color temperature rating is actually going to go up. And so a 6500 Kelvin is actually a really cool white light. 6500 K is actually like the color of daylight. As we go to the left here, it's going to go down. So our color temperature is 2000 or 3000. Now, the most popular for you guys for residential applications, it's either 2700, 3000. Sometimes people like to go to 3500 or 4000. But you're generally going to be living over here on the left side in the 27 or 3000 range. So a big thing here when you're talking with your clients is gauge their preferences. So on the left side here, we have a really warm color temperature, and on the right, we have a cooler one. I think both work for the space. On the left here, I think it's a nice rustic space. It's got kind of that cabiny look to it, and that fits this environment. It kind of matches the wood on the wall there, makes it a nice, warm, casual space. On the right here, I would say that's probably like 4000 K, and it's just much more modern. That kitchen is a pretty contemporary, pretty modern kitchen with the artwork on the wall there, and you have a lot of gray tones with it as well. So to me, that matches that space pretty well. I would say also the color temperature preference is going to differ by culture as well. Like there's certain parts of the world that really prefer this much cooler color temperature, and there's some that prefer this warmer one. But in general, again, you're going to live in that 27 or 3000 K range, especially in the bathroom. My personal preference is 2700 or 3000 in the bathroom, just because it keeps some of those features on your face when you're doing makeup or something like that. It softens them, and that's what you want when you're doing makeup or when you're brushing your hair or whatever it may be. So we're going to talk about different types of lighting or different methods of lighting. So the first and probably like the one you're most familiar with is incandescent lighting. Here in California, it's pretty much gone by the wayside, incandescent. So I just want to mention like the base types and kind of clarify and keep things simple. This is a candelabra base here. It's going to be used in mostly like chandeliers. It's also called an E12 base. So a big thing is if you're working with a customer and you're specifying a bathroom light, you may see the fixture on the spec sheet say medium. It requires a medium base light bulb. It might also say it requires an E26. They're the same thing. This is a medium base. That's like your standard size light bulb. An E12 is a candelabra base. That's the smaller size there. Those are generally in chandeliers, but not always. A lot of sconces use them as well. A lot of bathrooms also use G9 lamps. This is what a G9 looks like here. So if you see those on a spec sheet, that's what it's referring to. So if you want to replace them or recommend certain light bulbs to the customer, hopefully that's helpful to you guys, and then you can kind of take that and shop some bulbs using that base type. So halogen bulbs, so compared to incandescent bulbs, they are 30% more energy efficient. But we're going to gloss over this because we're really just going to focus on LED. That's pretty much what we're selling here in California. Same with xenon. These are were meant to be more energy efficient. Generally, they're smaller diameter lamps meant to produce a lot of light. Generally seen in under cabinet and strip lighting. But again, most of that stuff is going to LED at this point. Same with fluorescent. If you guys remember from a couple years ago, we were required to put in fluorescent bulbs in recessed lighting and a lot of fixtures. We've since found out that it's really difficult to dispose of those in an environmentally friendly way, and so we've kind of moved past that. Carbon or vintage style lamps, obviously very, very popular in the fixture world here. So this is just a style of light bulb. It mirrors the antique style of the 19th and 20th centuries. You're going to see it a lot more in those vintage style fixtures like this fixture here from Troy. This style is available in incandescent. It's also available in LED, and I'll talk about that in a sec. So LEDs, the most energy efficient, and pretty much you can forget everything I just said, because if you're here in California, this is pretty much all you can buy. That's not a blanket statement, but pretty much if you're working with a residential customer, you have to purchase LED to pass code or to even get the lamp here in California. For those of you guys on the call or have time at 1 o'clock, I'm also going to do a Title 20 and Title 24 PK. So if you guys want to jump on that to learn a little bit more, that's at 1. So LED stands for light emitting diode. It is usually rated for 25,000 to 50,000 hours. So compare that to like 1,000 hours for an incandescent. That's quite a big jump. So yes, they are a little bit more costly than a 75-cent incandescent bulb. But when you compare the lifespan, over the lifespan, it definitely pays for itself. And I will say too that depending on the last time you priced out an LED, the cost comes down every year. As we produce more of them, we get more efficient at it. The cost on those things and the quality of those bulbs really has increased and it's become a lot more cost effective. So definitely not all created equal. Tell you a little anecdote here. So my dad recently replaced some light fixtures in his house and was set on using incandescent bulbs. And as I'm a lighting person, I'm trying to tell him, hey, you should consider LED bulbs. And he had this stigma that all LED bulbs were white. They were very harsh on the eyes. And I asked him, I said, hey, when was the last time you purchased an LED? And he said, well, probably about, when you graduated from high school. I said, okay, well, that's a pretty long time ago. So maybe try it again, and I can kind of guide you and advise you. And that's really what you guys are hopefully there for in the showroom too, is to say, hey, if you're purchasing an LED, make sure it's the right color temperature. Make sure it's the right type of bulb. Do you want clear? Do you want frosted? Is it the right base type? And make sure it has a high CRI as well. So CRI is going to be the quality of the light. Fluorescent bulbs and some of the first LEDs had a really low CRI, so the quality of that light was really, really poor. So you'd appear like very gray, or you'd have like some splotchy parts from the light bulb, and really that's not the case anymore. So it's really important for you guys to understand what color temperature does to the LED, how bright it should be, and the CRI. Great part about that is you don't have to worry about that too much for the technical side. Purchase from Satco and you're getting a quality product. So let's talk about brightness. Here's the definition of a lumen. A unit of luminous flux in the international system of units that is equal to the amount of light given out through a solid angle by a source of 1 candela intensity radiating equally in all directions. I know you guys all got that. Here's what it really means. It's how bright the fixture is, or how bright that light source is. So it's a very technical definition, but really when we talk about brightness, we want to talk in terms of lumen output. So a lot of people will think, oh, I have a 100-watt bulb in my house, and then they'll come to you saying, hey, I have a 100-watt incandescent bulb in my house. I need it to be that bright. Well, what does that actually mean? So this is a helpful little chart here. Standard means standard incandescent. So a 100-watt incandescent bulb is roughly around 1,300 lumens. So if we're replacing that bulb, if that customer wants to make sure they're, equally as bright, if not brighter, we want to have roughly an 18-watt LED. But again, we want to talk in terms of lumen output. So not all 18-watt LEDs will be 1,300 lumens. Some might be more, some might be less. So it's really important when you're shopping or when you're specifying to just check that LED and make sure we're talking about lumen output for that bulb. And that should be very easy to find for those bulbs that you're specifying, whether it's from Satco or it's an integrated fixture. lumen output is always published for what you're purchasing. And here's another, just pretty much the same chart. So 1300 to 1600 lumens for 100 watt. Talks about average lifespan here. So generally about a year. It's going to depend how much you use it, but LED bulbs, 10 plus years, pretty safe assumption there. And we talked about color temperature, but here's another helpful chart. And again, I'm going to post these videos. If you guys want copies of this presentation so you can keep some of these charts, just shoot me an email. I'll have that info at the end. And then bulb shapes here. So again, we're not going to spend too much time on this, but I do want to mention just a couple things here. So an A series lamp here is going to be kind of like your standard light bulb. So if somebody says an A19, that's just referring to the shape of the bulb. So the most popular ones for you guys in a residential setting or for a retail customer, you've got like an A19 series here, a B series, and again, this is referring to the shape of the lamp, not the base. That's a different chart, but just the base, or I'm sorry, the shape. So you could have a candelabra bulb that's more of this torpedo style, or you could have it as a flames tip style, which is a CA series. A lot of newer decorative fixtures are going to use a globe type lamp, kind of trendy right now. That's just kind of a ball. And then definitely the T series lamps here. I'm sure you guys have seen those long filament styles. There's a million different bulb shapes and types out there. So definitely, if you have questions on that, reach out, or Google is always a really good resource too. That's how I find a lot of information. If somebody comes in looking for a lamp, if the product number is on there, type it into Google, see what kind of lamp it is, and see if you can purchase it from Satco or from one of your vendors. You usually can. So this is my information here. I'm going to leave this up for a little bit. So if you guys have questions, you can email me. Excuse me. A lot of you guys already have my email, which is great, and look forward to hearing from you. But if you don't, please write that down and use me for any questions you have regarding Hudson Valley lighting, specifying it, purchasing it, or Satco as well. You're open with both of those brands, and excuse me. We want to encourage you to use those brands because their quality, all the different requirements and things that we just spoke about as far as LED are going to be satisfied with those two. And so it's a really good brand. And as I said, check out their websites. Both of them have brand new sites, which make it really easy for you guys to specify and sell lighting. And then lastly, I would just say, try to incorporate lighting into your bids. I think just by asking the questions, like I said in the beginning, to start the process of getting them to think about it. The earlier on in the stage that you can do that, I think the better. It's always difficult to sell lighting as an afterthought from what I've found. So the earlier you can get them to think about that in the process of your remodel or whatever you're working on, I think the better. So thank you guys for your time. I hope you and your families are well. I know there's a lot of crazy stuff going on, and thinking of you all, and be well.
Appreciate it, Patrick. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick.
And if anybody has
See you at 1 o'clock.
certainly we'll stay on the line, so feel free to shoot them out.
Yeah, we'll see you in 15 minutes.
Sounds good.